Most people view debt as a cage, something to escape, something to fear. But if you look at the wealthiest structures in the world, you'll see they aren't running away from debt. They're running toward it, not because they are reckless, but because they understand a different map. In this video, I'm going to show you why debt is the most misunderstood tool in your wealth system, and how the wealthy use it to stay rich while the rest are taught to stay safe. First, we'll break down the difference between consumption debt and structural debt. Then, we'll look at the cheap loan note, the engine of speed. And finally, we'll talk about how to stop being a debtor and start being an architect. Chapter 1: The Debt Fear Trap. You will learn to stay away from debt. Don't spend what you don't have. Pay off the mortgage. Be debt-free. On a surface level, this sounds like wisdom. It feels safe. But look at the mirror. If you have zero debt, but only one income, you are still fragile. You aren't debt-free. You are leverage poor. Because while you are saving pennies, the system is printing dollars. Every year, the global money supply expands. A massive wave of new currency diluting the value of every dollar you've worked for. While you trade 40 hours of your life for a fixed sum, the system creates trillions with the click of a button. You are running a race against a printing press, and the press never sleeps. By the time you've saved enough for the safe path, the price of freedom has already moved out of reach. This is the hidden tax on playing it safe. The fear of debt is often what keeps you anchored to your job. It makes you play defense when the winners are playing a completely different game. The winners aren't trying to save a currency that is being debased. They are using that same debased currency to buy the assets that the currency is inflating. They aren't working harder, they are just architecting better. Chapter 2: Construction versus Consumption. The Good and the Bad Debt. Not all debt is created equal. Most people use debt to buy things that lose value. The car, the clothes, the lifestyle. That is consumption debt, or bad debt. It is a leak in your system. It drains your fuel. But there is a second type: construction debt. This is a loan used to acquire a growth asset, an asset that pays for the loan itself. One debt takes money out of your pocket. The other builds a bridge to a new income source. One is a cage, the other is a tool. Chapter 3: The Cheap Loan Node. In our wealth system, there is a specific node, the cheap loan. Why do the wealthy borrow at 3% when they have millions worth of assets or cash in the bank? Because if their assets grow at 8%, they are making a 5% profit on money that isn't theirs, without actually selling anything. This is arbitrage. It is the secret of the banking system. They take your deposits. They pay you 1%, then they lend it out at 7%. They are built on debt, but they aren't in danger, because their structure is designed to capture the spread. Chapter 4: The Story of Two Investors. Imagine Mark and Sarah. Mark saves $100,000 of his salary to cash buy a rental property. It takes him 10 years of trading his life for that cash. Now, he has $100,000 worth of property with $0 cash. Sarah has the same $100,000, but she uses it as collateral. She takes a cheap loan from the bank. She buys 4 properties. 10 years later, Mark has one income stream. Now Sarah has 4. Her rental income covers the loan payment, and she still has the initial $100,000. Mark used his life to build his wealth. Sarah used the system's leverage. Same starting point, different architecture. Chapter 5: The Structural Advantage. This is not a math problem. It's a perspective problem. If you only see debt as a burden, you will always be limited by how much you can personally earn. You become the bottleneck of your own wealth. But when you see debt as a node, you stop being the engine. You become the operator. The wealthy stay rich because they own the structure. They don't work for money. They manage the flow of capital. And capital is most efficient when it is borrowed at a low cost to buy a high growth asset. Chapter 6: Shifting Your Blueprint. I am not telling you to go out and get a loan tomorrow. That would be reckless. I'm telling you to change how you see the map. Stop trying to save your way to freedom. Saving alone is a leaking valve in an inflationary world. Start studying the wealth loop. How assets lead to collateral, how collateral leads to cheap loans, how cheap loans lead to more assets. When this loop starts spinning, your salary becomes optional. It becomes fuel for the machine rather than the only thing keeping you alive. Final truth: the money mirror. There is a difference between being a slave to debt and being a master of leverage. One requires you to trade your time, the other requires you to understand the system. Wealth isn't about how much you have, it's about how your structure is built. Because a strong structure survives the storm, a brittle one collapses under its own weight, and the mirror never lies. The question is, are you using your life to pay off your past, or are you using leverage to build your future?